everybody. Thanks so much for being here. My name is Julia Herbst, and I'm a senior editor at Fast Company. I'm very excited to be joined today by Carolyn Rods, who is the co-founder and CEO of Hello Alice, a fintech platform that supports more than 1.5 million small businesses. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. Love being at South by.
What a packed crowd we've got. So today we're going to talk about the Trump administration's policies and how business leaders are responding to this moment. For folks in the audience who might be a little bit less familiar, can you give just like a little brief primer on Hello Alice?
Sure. Also, thanks for the really light topic that we have.
I know, we just picked the light
today.
stuff.
So Hello Alice is a free digital platform for small businesses. As you mentioned, we support over 1.5 million businesses today, helping them grow a really healthy foundation. There's certain components that we know are core fundamentals to growing a healthy business, like ensuring that you have good financial management, great financial performance, good credit history, strong baseline metrics. And so our goal is to educate businesses like many of yours on how to get those metrics in order, what specific steps based on your unique business profile, the industry you operate in, where you live, the type of company and stage of growth that you're at. What are the steps that you have to take to push that company forward?
Awesome. Obviously, you work with founders and entrepreneurs who come from, a range of backgrounds, a range of demographics, a range of political persuasions too. So I'm curious just kind of generally what you've been hearing in the past couple of months about how they're responding to the Trump administration and just the general vibe that you're getting.
Our base of businesses is very reflective of the country at large. Small businesses are a very politically active group, and as you would imagine, we have representation on both sides of the aisle. I always say the great benefit is that small business is actually the one area that Democrats and Republicans, or one of the few areas, I should say, that Democrats and Republicans actually agree is really core to the success of our country. And so there is a lot of alignment across both parties. Certainly interesting times that we're living in today on a lot of kind of issues that indirectly impact small businesses, and that's where we're seeing a lot of the rhetoric. I would say overall, there is optimism. I mean, small businesses are a really optimistic group. If we ask them consistently, regardless of politics, regardless of what administration is at the helm, overwhelmingly, it's 60+% of our base that is confident or highly confident that the future is going to be better than the present. And so we haven't seen that waver, which is encouraging. But I think part of what attracts people to entrepreneurship is that we're a really optimistic bunch. So I don't know that we could ever dissuade that.
I was going to say, you kind of have to be an optimist if you're going to try to launch something and start it from scratch. So that makes a lot of sense. I guess kind of no matter what your political persuasion is, I think everyone would probably agree that the past couple of months have been a big time of transition, right? A lot is changing day to day. It's been hard to keep up with as a journalist, I would imagine. It's also hard to keep up with if you're a business owner, too.
Yes, that's a really nice way to say it. I think it's been chaos. I think every business out there that we hear from is trying to figure out, what does this mean for me and what does this mean for my business? And I think a lot of what we're going to break down today is, one, how do you even follow what's going on? And how do you make decisions for a business in the long term? I mean, we're talking to major corporations that are on pause right now because we're like, we don't know how to respond to these things. We don't know what's legal, what's not legal. We don't know what the impacts to the market are going to be. We don't know what impacts to our supply chain are going to be. There's this kind of wait and see approach, and I honestly think that's probably the most dangerous approach an entrepreneur can take. You're on limited cash flow, you have limited time, you're in a race against the clock to try to build your business. A wait and see approach, while it can work for a major corporation, it probably wouldn't be advised there either. It certainly doesn't work for a small business.
Yeah, I would imagine a lot of the conversations you're having with folks would be kind of saying like, okay, wait and see makes sense in a lot of ways, but you can't live in that area forever, right? At a certain point, you do have to be planning. What does 6 months look like? What does a year look like? What are we going to be doing long term? Is that something that people seem to get and are looking to move out of kind of that period of hesitancy?
Yeah, a lot of the guidance that we're providing is, prepare for today, but have a plan B and have a plan C. And I think it's smart in any environment, but more so today. When you're looking at supply chain, we don't know what's happening with tariffs. It's changing literally day by day right now, if not hour by hour, in terms of what the conversation is. in those shifts, starting to look at your supply chain, starting to think about, where are you sourcing your products from, and what countries are those coming from? Are those on the hot seat right now, or are they not? If they're not, great, you're probably okay. Nothing's going to pop up tomorrow, I think, and who knows? Who knows? But if you're sourcing from Mexico or Canada, it's probably time to think about, do you need to look at other sources? Do you need to take a deeper lens at your pricing models and structuring, and be prepared for when those get implemented, how those get implemented, at what rates, and exactly how that's impacting your bottom line.
I'm glad you bring up tariffs, because that feels like, kind of the elephant in the room, right? Like we were saying backstage, day to day, it's hard to keep up, right? Are these tariffs happening? Are they not? Obviously, we're seeing an impact on the stock market and just like a general vibe of uncertainty. I'm curious kind of what that looks like in terms of businesses feeling like they can invest in hiring and growth.
At the end of the day, I think the most important piece for a business to think about is their unit economics. At their core, what are their margins? What do they make per product that they're selling and putting out the door? And if you have a really good handle on your unit economics, you have an understanding of how much margin do you have in there, right? And if one of your suppliers bumps up 10% or 15% or 25%, how does that impact your overall pricing structure? Do you have the margin to weather that storm and figure out how you're going to improve your cost structure after tariffs are implemented? Or does a shift in tariffs tomorrow all of a sudden shatter your unit economics? If it shatters your unit economics, you better start thinking about that today. And I think the key piece is understanding, how do you prioritize the needs for your business? And you can't do that unless you understand clearly the unit economics of your business. So I would challenge everybody in this room, if you don't have a clear understanding of what your unit economics are, take that as homework that you go home with today. Figure it out, get a good handle on it, and understand how much room you have to play with in your pricing structure.
That's great advice. Yeah, I mean, another thing that obviously has been a real area of focus for the Trump administration is immigration enforcement, right? And of course, immigrants play a big role both in terms of labor and also our clients and customers of a lot of small businesses. So I'm curious what you've been hearing from these business leaders in terms of immigration enforcement and the impact that that can really have on a small business.
Yeah, it's interesting, but I think there's the very obvious impacts in terms of what happens when we have reduced immigration. Small businesses, many of them, and we've heard so much about the labor shortages, particularly in areas like hospitality, in a lot of manufacturing. I was with an entrepreneur just last week, and they were talking about they rely a lot on immigrants as their workforce, and they're like, we have Social Security numbers, we have paperwork, they're all documented. But she's like, but the reality is, I actually don't know. We haven't done the deep dive research that, are these actually legitimate Social Security numbers? Are these actually legitimately documented citizens? An unknown, and a real fear that what happens if that workforce goes away and the disruption to a company. This is a business that is employing people, has contributing, a contributing workforce, is creating jobs. There's a lot of unknowns, I think, even that businesses don't know within the micro ecosystem of their own business that they're trying to figure out. Then there's the macro level of what happens when there is a reduction in a net new flow of a workforce, and that's really concerning. An issue that we're seeing not just in the U.S., but we're seeing this impact globally. And when you open up the doors for immigration, it's great for small business. And overall, that additional workforce creates more of an economic, inflow, but a real fear and unknown. And so I think, again, one of those areas that people are frozen, but I think it's important to, one, understand the breakdown of your own workforce, understand the future needs of what your structure needs to look like over the next 12 months, and get a head start on trying to get a really stable workforce and build in programs for employee loyalty, for talent acquisition. Really think through what those processes look like for your specific industry and business, so that you're prepared to find the best talent that you can find, independent of what the political situation looks like.
Yeah. I feel like I'm just throwing all these different topics at you, but there's a lot we want to hit in a very short amount of time. So I feel like we should transition a little bit to talking about taxes, because it's tax season. And obviously, a lot of people, I think, are a little uncertain about what that's going to look like this year. I mean, for one, the personnel cuts at the IRS. could potentially be impacting business owners' tax returns? Is that something that you're hearing concern about from folks?
I would say taxes are probably one of the silver linings that small businesses are looking at right now. I mean, the benefit of the current administration is that there is a focus on a reduction in tax rates and really looking at how can they build a tax structure that's simple, that's easy to decipher and understand, and that is beneficial to small business. There's a lot of noise, certainly, around what that means for benefits to the wealthiest people in the United States. There's a lot of concern over who's benefiting the most. But I will say, regardless of who, small businesses will stand to benefit if a lot of this policy goes through.
Yeah, I think you're probably referring, at least in part, to the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which I know Trump has said that he wants to pass permanently, right? That has a deduction of up to 20% for small businesses. What do you think the odds are of that happening, and what would be the impact for small business owners?
I can't gamble on what what gets passed through in this environment. I mean, I think, again, the benefit is on both sides. There's a desire to support. Now, what that means for each side of the aisle is different. Obviously, we have a very Republican-heavy environment right now, and so I think a high likelihood that the things they say they want to push through are going to be pushed through. That said, I do think it's really critical that businesses stay on top of what new regulations are coming out, what new tax code is coming out. There's a lot of tax benefits that are available for things like research and development, for certain things that are beneficial to certain communities. Like there's always kind of new opportunities for businesses to navigate. And so one of the things that we've really focused on at Hello Alice is, because there's so much changing so quickly, is helping to do a better job educating through our newsletters, through our platform, on what's coming out, what's new, what's happening, so that you don't have to filter through everything, but you can figure out what's actually relevant to you based on your business. It's a lot to try to sift through. Even accountants that we're talking to are like, they're having a hard time staying on top of it. So the idea that any entrepreneur, in addition to running their business, can have a really solid handle on what the current tax code is
not realistic,
very,
maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, so much of what you do seems to be education-based. And what are you recommending people do, because no one can stay, up to date with every single headline as it happens? Like, what sort of cadence should people be checking in, trying to figure out these sorts of things, and making sure they do have a general grasp on these big policy changes?
Yeah, find a resource that you trust that is staying on top of these things. And there are a lot out there. That's a job that we've taken on at Hello Alice, is how do we make it easier to educate you on the things that you need to know, and how do we keep those things free and available for everybody? But there's a lot out there. The other thing is the wonderful artificial intelligence that's out there. Just ask the questions that you have. Double check it, check your sources to make sure that what you're hearing is actually fact. But it's an easy way, if you have a doubt or a question or something that's really specific to you, just ask the question. It's frankly probably a better and more reliable answer. Not always 100% certain, but a better and more reliable answer than you'll probably get from asking, a random kind of expert that you bump into on at an event or a peer. Both great resources as well, but I would say I would actually trust the AI at this stage more than I would trust, because there's so much conflicting advice out there.
Yeah, are you seeing a lot more entrepreneurs really embrace AI as a way to stay up to date on this sort of stuff?
It's a big area of, I don't want to say concern, but an area that we're watching really closely. There's a huge disparity. We've done a lot of research across our base, and a huge disparity in terms of those utilizing AI and those not. And we're starting to see a really quickly widening gap in the data of the revenue growth of those leveraging it versus the revenue growth of those not. And it's actually a project that we have in the works currently, is investing heavily both in the education of small business owners around how to utilize AI for automation, how to use it in their general workflow, and then also actually integrating it into Hello Alice so that companies start to get used to using it, relying it, trusting it, and building frameworks that are applicable to your own business. So I would, again, just as another bit of homework, I'm sure many of you are using it in some capacity, in some way. Study it, and study it consistently. because if you can stay on the cutting edge of it, I think it's going to be one of the greatest determinants of who is thriving and who is kind of seeing either no or minimal growth going forward.
Yeah, what do you think it's going to take to sort of bridge that gap between those who are already experimenting and embracing it and those who feel like, maybe it's not for them or, not as relevant?
It will be for everybody. I think just accepting that. I think it's very much like the internet. There were people that adopted it very quickly, and there's a big learning curve at the beginning, and there are people that waited longer. The reality is, we're all using the internet today, and we'll all be using artificial intelligence because it's going to be embedded into everything that we're doing. And probably you're already using it in many ways. And I'm sure I feel like in this room, I would say with almost 100% certainty that everybody's using it. That said, I think it's interesting when I talk to even people in tech and even engineers and sometimes the level of adoption in the gaps where they're not using it in really ways that are could be major game changers in terms of their productivity, their ability to grow their businesses. That's where I would really challenge people. Research, understand, talk to people, come to conferences like South by and study so that you can be on the cutting edge because it's going to give you a massive advantage in terms of how you grow your company.
I want to make sure we talk a little bit about healthcare too, since I know that that's a topic where there's a lot of uncertainty and, it could have a huge impact, right, depending on what policy changes are made in the healthcare space on how much small businesses are able to scale. So what's your current thinking on that? What are you advising folks? And what are you hearing about sort of anxieties that people might have around healthcare costs?
I will say, we've worked with companies in other countries, and I think healthcare is an area that is a massive burden for small businesses in the U.S., and it's very complex. Hello Alice is a remote company, and I remember in our early days, we have now employees in almost every state, and trying to understand how we navigate the difference from state to state is a huge cost for us as a business. We have the benefit of great employee retention. We have the benefit that because we have a remote workforce that has a flexible work structure, we have really strong retention, but the overhead that comes with managing an employee in California versus an employee in Texas, where they're totally different structures, different insurance that we use, all kinds of different requirements, is a huge burden, not to mention the cost for a business, but also the cost to the employee is really critical. It's a benefit that I think for small businesses as you're thinking through how to think about healthcare and what the support looks like for your companies. Often I think it's a benefit that's under-recognized by employees, and so taking time, it's the same thing with stock options. I always tell people, great benefits, there's a lot of perks for employees. Take time consistently to walk your employee base through the perks that you offer. I'm always shocked. We do this twice a year. We have an update for the whole team of these are the benefits available to you. Consistently, when we do our employee surveys, we hear back of, hey, I wish we had this or I wish we had that. And we say, you have it. It's there.
Already.
Look in your employee manual. We reviewed it. Consistently educate your employees because they often don't understand the benefits that you're providing and the cost of that benefit. They know what they're paying for healthcare. They don't understand the piece of that you are covering as a business. And so inform them and let them know this is the work that we're doing. Here's the values we have as a business, and here is the benefit to you. But to get back to your core question on healthcare, the U.S. does not have the ideal model. I'll just leave it at that. And there's a lot of work to be done there.
Definitely. Yeah, it sounds like communication is like a really big area where employers can do more, right, to just sort of emphasize what they're offering, what they have. Are there other areas where communication is something that you're really recommending for folks who use Hello Alice?
Certainly. Pricing, I think when we talk about tariffs and we talk about supply chain and inflation and the impact that has on your cost structure, ultimately, a lot of those additional costs are going to have to be passed down to the consumer. We see it in egg prices. We're seeing it across just about everything that we're purchasing today. It's critical that as you have to raise prices, and it's very likely it will happen in your industry if it hasn't happened already, be really transparent with your customer base. If people understand the why, they're going to be much more likely to stick with your company and see you through the change. You can also share the work that you're doing to try to reduce that cost structure and steps that you're trying to take to bring it back down. But I think open communication on any pricing change with your customer base is very, very important. And there's countless stories I'm happy to share after as to where it's been successfully implemented. But if you have to make an adjustment, over communicate to your base as early in the process as you can so that they can come along for the ride with you. And frankly, in many situations, they want to support. They know that you're struggling, you're taking on some of the burden as a company. They're actually very willing as consumers, to the extent that they can, to ride that wave with you.
Sure, but it really does come back to communication and kind of, as you say, over communication. What might seem kind of redundant or like excessive might just be actually the correct amount of communication.
And internally, too, I think it's important with your teams. It's really hard for a sales team when prices are going up to have to go out and sell the same product. It means their commissions are often lower because they're selling less. So there's a lot of internal pushback that happens when you have pricing adjustments. If you can communicate that effectively internally as to why you're doing it and why it matters for the business, you'll help get people's engagement and trust, and then that in turn is going to help you push that message outward.
Yeah, talking about communication, I mean, I think one thing that a lot of companies are struggling to do right now is communicate around DEI, right? And sort of get that right. Obviously, you guys know more than others about.
Unfortunately, we've gone through a lot of the deep into a lot of the conversation around DEI.
Yeah, I'm wondering if you can offer some advice to business leaders who are really committed to doing DEI work, and obviously also, feeling the chilling effect of the anti-DEI backlash, about how they can still sort of communicate that effectively, and what you guys have learned.
Yeah, for context, for those who may not know, Hello Alice really started with a mission of building an equitable and inclusive small business ecosystem. And so we've been at the core of DEI, frankly, prior to the Me Too movement, prior to Black Lives Matter. We were talking about small business before anyone was really talking about small business as to the extent they certainly do today. And we were talking about diversity and inclusion when it was a really small group of people talking about it, before there were, chief diversity officers at companies or many of the things that we see in structures today. It's put us at the center of a lot of this conversation. We work with a lot of major corporations around their DEI efforts. We have been swept up in the lawsuits. We have a very public lawsuit going on right now, if anyone wants to Google it and look it up, that's cost us millions of dollars. And it is really, what is most frustrating to me, I'll say, in all of that is on both extremes, it's a really hard conversation to win, and equity is a really hard thing when you start getting into the weeds to try to achieve. And I will say I've learned a lot over the 8 years that we've been running Hello Alice around DEI. And at the end of the day, what I've accepted is I think everybody, regardless of the conversation, wants to feel like they're getting a fair shot. People's interpretation of that is vastly different. And ultimately, I think focusing on making every individual feel like they're getting a fair shot is the only way we're ever going to achieve an environment that works for most. I don't think we ever will have an environment that works for all, but an environment that works for most in an equitable way. What really concerns me is, as we're talking to a lot of our corporate partners, is that wait and see. They're frozen. They're afraid to move. They're big companies where there is a great fear of the public backlash on either side of their move. We're a small company and we're a very nimble company, and so we've been able to actually fight this fight longer than many of the large corporations with massive pocketbooks around us have. A lot of them are settling. A lot of them are pulling out. We are pushing and pushing as far as we can, and it's expensive for a company our size. But, I think what's scary is that the law is changing. The ability to do the things that we want to do is shifting. The ability to spend private dollars in the way that you want to spend private dollars is changing. And when I look at the fact that, 0.4% of funding is going to Black entrepreneurs, less than 2% is going to women entrepreneurs. We see the same thing in the Latino community. We see the same thing across the board. And in many of these communities, to say going back to the way things operated before is going to work, it's a pipe dream. Like, that's never going to happen, because we gave it decades for that to happen, and it never did. And so at the end of the day, it's figuring out, how do we operate in the environment that we're in today and still offer the resources and needs and fulfill the needs of what is clearly an economic gap that the status quo won't solve.
Definitely. We just have a couple more minutes left, and I want to make sure that we leave everyone with some really kind of tangible, practical advice. I'm sure there are a lot of small business owners and entrepreneurs and people who are getting things up and running. Obviously, this is a moment with a lot of disruption, a lot of new technology, and a lot of change, which I think can be kind of exhausting and, as you say, like lead people into sort of a sense of paralysis. So what advice do you have for people in the audience who are feeling overwhelmed by all of these things and want to come up with a more sustainable way to exist?
Cut out the noise. There is so much noise in today's environment. And to the degree you can cut out the noise and focus on the 1, 2, or 3 things that you can do today to push your company forward, those are the businesses that will succeed. Focus on your core fundamentals. Understand what you have to work on right now. Read the paper, do your thing, have your outlet, but time box that and don't get swept up in the noise. I've seen it in so many cases where a competitor comes into a market and it just paralyzes people because they're so consumed with what that competitor is doing that they forget to focus on their own business. We're seeing it now with the conversation around politics. So much noise. You could spend all day digging into the noise and you're going to forget about your own company. Focus on your business, focus on those core fundamentals, and keep pushing those forward. And if you're doing that, you're going to build enough support around your business that you're going to learn how to navigate when these things pop up and directly impact your company. You're going to have the network, you're going to have the resources, you're going to have the cash reserves that you can actually figure out a strategy to put in place so that you can work around it. So education is important, but don't over-educate yourself. Focus on your core fundamentals.
Oh, there you go. Thank you so much. Really appreciate the conversation.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great conference.
Thanks.